start the recording. So today I'm going to spend about half an hour or 40 minutes looking at plant data, the SoftWorks tab specifically, and inserting plant material, editing plant material. We can look a little bit at label styles and schedule styles, and also talk about the database a bit more. So let's go ahead and go to one viewport here so you can see my screen a little better. And I want to apologize. Last week I think we had some technical issues with the screen share freezing up on us. Hopefully that's been resolved. And as always, we'll post this on YouTube following the presentation today. So here I've got a drawing that's already been in progress from kind of an illustrative stage. I've gone ahead and started tagging some plants around this pool deck. But let's look at really how I've done this and how I've built out this, this schedule that's over here to the right. So just to review on plant material, we have basically 4 types of ways to insert plants. We have specimen that applies to trees, shrubs, anything that you want to show as an individual symbol. Examples of those in the drawing would be this tree, these 4 shrubs. All of those are individual specimens. If we wanted to show, let's say, these 4 shrubs as an area, maybe they're a smaller shrub, maybe they're a perennial or a grass, we might use an area-based command like this, this region here, which is a planting area. Below that, we have a hedge, and that would be, it's a linear-based takeoff, so that would follow a polyline. And then the last method is grass area, which is very similar to plant area, but instead of quantities, it produces a takeoff for ounces of seed, or an area takeoff for sod. So just a little bit different than planting area. So let's quickly add a few of these types of material, and I'll do it off in space so it's a little bit easier to see, not so cluttered. Let's put in a few trees. So I just clicked on Add Specimen. I'm going to do it manually from scratch. I'm going to indicate the spread and the height. The spread is going to dictate the width of the block. The height is going to dictate the height of the block if we happen to choose a 3D block. The important thing to note here is that you do have to have a height. Even if you never plan on going to 3D, you have to put something in this field. So it can be 1 foot, it could be 100 foot. I usually just match whatever the spread is if I don't know for sure. I'll just do 25 feet and 25 feet. Next, we'll go down to specification. And the specification button is how we choose the attributes that we want to tag to this symbol. So first, let's select our symbol. I click select symbol, and we can do a simple CAD symbol like this. We can do a filled symbol, like I kind of have in this drawing already. Or we could do 3D symbols if we're preparing for, say, a rendering or some kind of visualization like that. So we'll just pick this filled symbol. We'll pick a tree. Let's pick one near the top of the list here that has a common name and abbreviation. We want to go to height. This is all information you can add at your leisure as you develop the plan, as you understand more what's available at the nursery. So there, we got some specs there. I click OK, and I do a manual insert. I can place as many trees as I want to, and they're all going to be accounted for on the same label. So If you just have one tree that you want in one area and then another tree on the other side of the site, you're going to want to do this individually. If you're making a small grouping of trees like I did here, you can do them all at the same time. I hit enter, and there it knows that there's 3 plants. So when I hit OK, I can place my label, and it knows that those 3 are linked together. So I place the label on the first click. My second click, I pick the fixed leader point. If you can see down on my command line, I'll make it a little bit bigger. We're adding a fixed leader point, and that's the one that's going to stick to the plant material. After that, it asks for floating leader points, so I can design this however I want to. I can create a landing. I could just tie it straight to the text here. I'll just create a little landing freehand. I do have some polar snaps on that helps me draw the line straighter. I hit enter, and there it's drawn my leader. So this leader is not quite appropriate for this location. Let me change that to the standard. This is closer to what you're going to see when you're using a new install of Keysoft, is a label sort of like this. So I can move that around now. You can see the fixed leader point sticks to the center of that tree I specified, and the floating leader points stay arranged as I had them. So, say I wanted to put this label on the other side, I'd probably want to, scoot this stuff around a bit like that. So in a nutshell, that is how you insert a specimen from scratch. So that could be a tree, it could be a shrub, that could be anything you want to indicate with individual plant symbols. You can also note that it draws a link line in between these objects. And that really is just another feature on a layer. If for some reason you prefer not to display the link line in your drawings, you can always freeze that off. It comes in by default to the specimen link line layer. You can freeze that there, and it disappears. So it's up to you. Or you can leave it on and set it to a no plot setting is also another option. So back to SOFTWORKS again. Let's work our way across the toolbar and create a hedge. So I'm going to again add hedge, and this is going to give me the full menu. I can do whatever I want to here. I haven't drawn any polylines in the drawing yet, so I can draw it from this command. That would be the draw length button here. Or if I had a polyline that I wanted this hedge to follow, I could do a select length. But let's draw it from scratch. Let's do a draw length. I'm just going to draw from this point. And once you start the command, it's just like drawing a polyline. You can draw straight line segments. I could hit A for arc and then start drawing curved segments if I want. And let's just do that. Straight line and a couple curves, and hit OK. Delete source object pops up. This is a question if you want for the program to automatically delete your construction line, it can do that. Or you can have it remain. It's up to you. And it can also, if you have a preference, you can have it remember that setting. But I'll hit no. I'll leave that line intact. The next thing I want to do is set the density. So I have 90 feet of line there. I want to do an on-center spacing, so I pull down the density menu. I go on center, and let's do it 3 feet on center, and that's going to give me 31 plants along that polyline. I can go ahead and tie data to that if I'd like with the specification button. And then I can choose whatever plant material that might be. So if it's a shrub, I go to shrubs. I will pick something quickly. Might not be appropriate for this, but I don't want to focus on what it is, just how it's done. So let's pick a fountain grass for sure. Great. Let's pick some other attributes. Maybe we know the pot size from the nursery. You can also select a symbol here. It's not going to display by default, but there are options where you can display a symbol. I usually just leave this as a circle until I have the need to use a symbol, but I'm going to use the hedge outline for this plant. So we set a few options. Let's go ahead and preview and just see what we have right now. So that's not really accurate to what I want. All it's done is drawn a continuous outline along that polyline. Let's hit enter to return to the dialog. And we're going to go to pattern. And that's how we set the way it creates this plant. So we know we already said it's a 3-foot on center plant. That means we want the outline to be about 1.5 feet off that polyline. So I set offset to 1.5 feet, hit finish, and let's preview that again. So that's got the dimensions closer to real life, but I might want to emphasize this with a pattern, make it pop a little more. So I'll go back to pattern again, and I can click on the ellipse here and see all the preloaded patterns we have. We can use any of these we want to. One that seems to work well is this one here. It's one down and one to the right. It's called hedge.dwg. Click OK. Click OK. Again, we can set the scale of that. If we need to, we can adjust it here. That's going to affect how big the bubbles are in this pattern. The offset should be fine because that represents the size of our plant. So let's do it 3 by 3 with a 1.5 foot offset. Set preview. Great. And so that's kind of added some texture to it. It looks more like a plant now. And let's say we're happy with that. We click OK to finish the command. Again, we can place the label, pick a point, a fixed leader point, and then pick a few floating leader points. And now we have that plant laid out. You can see this came in differently. I still have another different specification style set by default. So let me get rid of that default. That's going to just confuse things. We want to use the Keysoft standard. There we go. And let me set that to default. And we'll get into that menu here in a moment as well. Okay, moving down the line, let's do a planting area quickly. I hit add. Again, I'm doing this from scratch. Geometry, we can select how we draw this, either select a pre-drawn polyline. From boundary uses a boundary command to click within an area and try to determine a boundary itself. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, depending on how tight your drafting is. Draw area lets you draw it freehand using the polyline command. So let's do draw area. Let's start here. Again, you have all the options of a polyline. I'm going to let's do an arc. The arc's kind of funky, so I'm going to do a second point. I hit S for second point. That lets me draw some tangent lines here that are a little bit more fluid. And then I'm going to end the command by closing the polyline. And that is CL is a shortcut for close. Delete source object. No, I want that to stay on screen, if nothing else, just so we can see how Keyscape is building the area within that line. So once again, I'm going to go down to density, choose a spacing. This is kind of a big area. In real life, I wouldn't draw a shrub bed that large. It's 112 plants. That's fine for demonstration purposes. Again, we can go ahead and pick a plant. Let's grab one quickly here. And let's pick that one. Again, you can pick a symbol. That's more of an advanced option, though. We can display these areas by symbol. That's really only useful, I think, when you're doing 3D visualization. You want to see a textured symbol versus just an outline of an area in 3D. There we go. Just trying to find a species that has a common name as well as an abbreviation. Again, we can pick all the data we want to here. And say we had some extra specifications added. Maybe we're looking at water usage. We want to add a tag there as well. Okay. So let's do a preview. And again, you can see that by default, all it did was draw an outline slightly offset from the construction line. And that might be fine. Maybe you want to fill that with a hatch, or maybe you want to, maybe you just like that clean look. That's fine. But if we want to add more texture to that, I hit enter to go back to the menu. Just like in the hedge, I go to pattern, and I can set things like offset, which is this is offset from the construction line. This doesn't affect at all the plant count. The only thing it affects is the graphic display of the pattern. And let's say we want a textured pattern like a bubble. We'll do that. And again, we can play with the scale here. Sometimes you have to go back and forth a bit to find the one that looks best at the scale of your drawing and all of that. But 3 by 3 is a good place to start. Let's preview again. That's fine. It kind of simplified the edge here. Let's go back and decrease the scale by a bit. Let's do 1.5 and 1.5. Preview that. And that gives us a little better texture, and it follows that curved polyline better. So I hit OK. I like my specification. I like my pattern. I can place a label now if I'd like. If you don't care about placing a label at this time, you can just hit enter to close the command. You can always come back and add the label later. So there we go. The last area is grass area. I'm going to skip that just because it's very similar to laying out a planting area, same principle. It's just you're looking at, instead of 3 feet on center, you're setting your density based on usually ounces per cubic yard of area for seeded areas. And as I've added these 3 different plant groupings in, it's also been updating my schedule automatically, which is great. It's been appending this data to what I already have in the schedule. So that's good. Let's look at how these labels are built really fast. If I go to modify styles, this is under specification. So this is a specification subgroup. This applies to specification applies to the label itself. If you want to edit the schedule, it's going to be in the schedule subgroup here to the right. So let's stick with the specification subgroup. Let's go to modify styles. And that's going to bring up this menu. And it could be a little overwhelming at first because there is a lot of buttons. There's a lot of choices here. But the theory is that you're laying out information from the database in the order that you want. So in this one, I've got number of plants, which reflects the number 31 in the background, and then species, which is the botanical name. Let's say that I wanted to replace species with abbreviations. I go up here and pick the subcategory for that data type. So it's a software specification. Then I can choose from a list of possible data types. So if we wanted, we could put height. If we noted height on these plants, we could put height in the label. And that's probably not very useful a lot of the times. Most of the time we're dealing with just names, common names, or abbreviation. So let's do that. Let's insert that. I'm going to overwrite the species cell. It's going to replace one data type with another. So then when I hit apply and close, it changes from the botanical name to the abbreviation throughout the drawing. If I wanted to keep editing that, maybe I want to tweak it a little more, I go back to modify style, and I can keep doing things such as if I wanted to underline the label, if I wanted to change the overall text height, I do that in default cell properties. That affects every single cell within the label. So maybe I want that to be 1.5. I hit apply, and then I hit close. There, it's increased the scale. Because I changed the scale, I might have to tweak my labels a bit. So it's a give and take here. Once you have your style set the way you like it, things become much more streamlined. So once I've got this the way I like it, which I kind of like this style now. It's very simple. It's clean. I could do an export. So let's do export, and let's save it as something I can recognize. Let's call this Nate Style 2. I probably have Nate Style 1 in here. I hit save, and that's written it out to our default data location. Say I start a new drawing and I want to use that same label again. I go back to this modify styles dialog box. I go import, and then I can find the style I want to use. So Nate Style 2, open, and that brings it into this drawing. So now when I place a plant label, it's going to use that style. We can modify the specification labels also from this subcategory. So say I wanted to switch between styles like I was doing before. There's a set style button. I could select multiple items, hit enter, and I can choose between labeling styles quickly here. If I messed up when I drew the label, that next pull down helps me fix those kind of things. So remove is very useful. If I want to just start from scratch, I hit remove. I click on the label I want to remove, hit enter. I have some options here. Text only just gets rid of the label. Text and spec clears out the entire specification for that plant. So for the most part, I had that spec right, I think. I just want to replace the label because I kind of messed up when I placed it. So I'll hit text only, and now that's gone. The easiest way to replace it would be to, say, double click on the object, or the other way to do that would be to modify. So this is a hedge, so I go to hedge, modify, select the hedge I want to edit, hit enter. I review my specification and click OK, and then I replace the label. Let's put it there. Let's place the fixed point anywhere I want, and I draw the label back to the tag, and I can edit that and move that around as I see fit. The last button of interest in the specification subgroup is the specification manager. That lets me make global changes across the entire drawing to every plant that shares a common specification. So for example, I know that I have 4 honey locusts on this site, and they're spread out across the site. I don't know necessarily where they are, and I don't want to go through one by one and find them. So I click on the Gladitsia species here that highlights the whole line, and I hit modify specification. When this menu comes up, it's going to give me the opportunity to change any attribute I want that's tied to that tree. So in this case, I haven't filled out a ton of data. Maybe at this point I know that the nursery has in stock some 14 to 16 foot trees, and maybe I want those to be a 3.5 inch caliper minimum, and pot size, it's probably a bagged and burlap anyway. I could add that as an option if I wanted to. We'll say it's in a box. And let's hit OK. And then apply that to the drawing. Now if I look at the Gleditsia tricanthos, it's added this data along the specification. If I hit OK and we go over to the schedule, we're going to see it added that data, the size, the roots, which in this schedule I'm calling it root, but you can name this anything you want to, is showing the pot size. So that's a very useful tool as you progress through the drawing and have revisions that need to be made. You can make those globally. You can also globally change, say, the symbol out, which can be very powerful when you're switching between a design development phase and a construction document phase. Let's quickly look at the schedule itself. I already have one in here. It's been highly modified, but let's insert a default schedule. In the schedule subgroup, I click on Insert Schedule. I have a couple styles. I have one style I've already created. I'm just going to use the standard. Let's hit OK, and let's put it off to the side here of the other schedule I have in the drawing. This is how it's going to look when you first run Keyscape. You've got your subgroups of trees, shrubs, whatever, conifers, and then you've got these columns of number, abbreviations, species, and these work very much like the labels do. If I want to edit this, again, in the schedule subgroup, I go up here to this top button, pull it down, and go to Modify Style. This is the same theory as in the Specification style editor. This is the schedule style editor. We can look at this information cell by cell and edit it as we see fit. Important things to note here, let me pull this off to the side so we can see the schedule in the background, is a schedule header, and that's the title up here. If you click on that, you can go to selected cell properties, change things like text style, text color, text height. And with the selected cell properties tab, you're only going to affect that one cell. If you were to make a change to, say, the default cell properties, that's going to affect every cell that doesn't have an overwrite. So it's kind of like if you think about layers in AutoCAD. You can set color within your layer, but then when you're drafting, you can overwrite that color with a different color. That's the way that default cells are going to apply to the whole drawing. So say we want the entire schedule to be 2-foot high text. We'll make that change. And then say we want the schedule header to be 3-foot tall. We'll go to selected cell and make that one 3. Hit apply, hit close, and you can see it made all my text 2-foot, but then this one it made 3-foot because I had overwrote the default. Let's go back to continue editing this schedule. We can either go back to the pull-down menu here, modify style, or I can just double-click here on the schedule itself. Let's call this plant list. So to me, it looks like the cells are a bit crowded. The text is really going edge to edge within the cells on the screen. So I'm going to set cell margin and increase this to 1 foot on every side. Another thing I want to see in my list is additional categories. So right now I'm only showing the number of plants, abbreviation, species, specification, and density. If I scroll down, I can see every plant group. We have trees. If I scroll down, we have shrubs. We have herbaceous. We have climbers. Everything's included here that's possible within Keyscape. If we want to edit and add a column, we'd often want to apply it to all of these categories. So let's put our cursor near where we want the new category to be. So I want to add a common name between the species name and the specification. So I have my cursor highlighted here. I go to General, and I want to do a software specification. From the next pull down, I select common name. I want to apply that to multiple columns. That means multiple plant types, so shrubs and trees and herbaceous and everything. I want this data to be present in all those categories. So I click multiple, and this gives me the choice to where to insert the data, which I want it to be in column 4 up here. That's going to shift everything else to the right one column. And then I can check every type of category I want it to be in. I'm going to do select all groups. Okay. Okay. Looks like I selected the wrong one. Let me do common name again. Multiple. Okay. There we go. I hit apply. I hit close. I hit OK. And you can see we first changed the cell margin, and that gave us some more spacing around the information. And then I changed and added a new column called common name, which is coming in here. So that's the basics of how you edit your specification label and your schedule. I think we'll probably host another webinar that goes into more detail on that. It can get very detailed. You can set text styles. You can define column widths. There's a lot of changes you can make. But in general, these are the early on changes you're going to want to get the right information communicated to your builder, your contractor, or the rest of your team. The last thing I want to look at today is the database itself. So this is useful if you want to specify a plant and it's not present in the database. The way to add plant material is here in the first tab called Species. We first want to determine what species group we want to add or modify. So let's look at trees, and we select the attribute we want to change, which is species name, to add or remove a tree. Down in the Modify button, we click that, and it gives us our options. If I wanted to edit a tree, I highlight it and then click Modify. I can either edit, delete, or add again. Let's edit a tree. That might give us a better idea of how the workflow happens. So let's edit this apple. So I can just change the name here and say it's misspelled the cultivar, or maybe this, I prefer to label it a different way. I change it to apple test. It's going to redo that. It's going to resort the list. Now when I go back to apple, you can see it's here. This particular species doesn't have a common name associated with it, so I could go modify, add, and call this, let's call it Nate's new apple. This is all theoretical. Of course, you would probably use your botanical name here. Your common name would be the common, the localized common name. You could have multiple of those. So if you have different ways of naming plants in different regions, you can do that. You can also add multiple abbreviations, and that's handy if you have a couple plants in your drawing that might have the same name, it might have the same abbreviation. You need to differentiate those, so you might need to choose between a couple different abbreviations. So there I've edited a plant with a new name. I could have just as easily done add from scratch and create a new plant called test plant. Hit OK. Go over to the T's. There it is, test plant. And again, add a common name, add abbreviations to that. So you can do the same thing with shrubs or perennials or anything else as you see fit. Also within each subcategory, so within trees, within shrubs, within perennials, you can also edit some other attributes that populate when you're specifying a tree. So say height ranges. If I click on height, these are the possible height ranges that are popping up in my menu. Some of these I might not need, and you can delete as you see fit. So here in the States, we probably don't specify by centimeters a lot. I could do modify, delete, and remove that item. We do specify nursery stock heights quite often. So right now I have a 14 to 16 foot range. I have a 16 to 18. Say I wanted to add another one. I can just do add and call this, let's call it 5 to 15 feet, which isn't realistic, but just for example, you can put in whatever you want to. Now that will be available in the pull down when I'm specifying a tree. I can do the same thing for girth. So I usually use the girth category for caliper. You can set your caliper ranges there. Pot size. I remember earlier I wanted to specify B and B. I didn't have that in the list, so I'm going to add that here. Okay, so that's going to show up in the drop down when I'm specifying trees. It's not going to appear in shrubs because that has its own fields. If I go to shrubs, I go to pot size, it's got its own list of pot sizes because a lot of times it's not crossover there. The last thing I want to touch on today before we finish up is the plant lists. And what that is a way to tie plant info such as name, size, species, symbol, all together in predefined lists. So you're not, say, defining that individually every time you want a maple tree. You're not clicking new specimen, 25 foot, find the Acer category, select the height range, select the pot size. With planting lists, we can define all that up front and have some preferred plants already ready to go. So I'm going to select a group, which you have multiple groups. Let's call this one projects. Oops. Maybe we have another one that's called like regional. Maybe it's different zones. We have different lists for different zones. However you want to organize these, it's up to you. So let's use a project list. Let's add a plant list, and we're going to call it Nate's plant list. And you can add a description here if you'd like. It's up to you. But basically, this is the same process as specifying a plant into the drawing. So I go to specify. When that menu comes up, I go to the type of material I want. So say it's a tree. I pick a tree. I want it to be a certain height. I want it to be a certain girth. So 3-inch caliper. And you can see those new categories I added are now present. B and B. I can even pick a preferred symbol to associate with that tree. I hit OK, and I hit Add. And that adds it to Nate's plant list. I can do this as many times as I want to. I can add trees and shrubs and perennials, whatever I see appropriate for this list. If I want to modify something, say I made a mistake, I just click on the entry, go back to specification, make the changes as I see fit. So let's change my height from that silly 5 to 15. Let's change it to 10 to 12. Hit OK. Then I hit Update. And that updates the entry here. So theoretically, I could go through and create 10s, 20s, or hundreds of plants in here and have a preferred list. I click OK. I click Finished. Now say I wanted to put a new tree into my drawing. I went Add Specimen, Insert New. Again, let's say it's a big shade tree. I go to Specification, and now instead of scrolling through all the menus to find the tree I want, I just go to my list, find the acer there, put it in the drawing, and I'm good to go. So this helps speed things up and create uniformity if there's a certain nursery you work with a lot, or there's a certain nursery stock that tends to be available more often than not. But as you can imagine, building out those plant lists by hand like I was doing can get tedious. So it might make sense to do it the way I have been doing it. Do add, go specification, pick out all the data you want, create the plant. You might clone it around the site, and then you end up, over time you've built up a project with a bunch of plants in it like this one. So I've got probably 20 plants specified in this project. What I can do is extract a plant list from this project. I'm going to go, it's in the next to database manager. There's some little pull downs next to that. It's the middle one here. Pull that down and I go extract plant list from drawing. So I can add it to whatever group I want. So let's add it to my projects group I created earlier. Now I'm going to call this Nate's Project 2. Click OK. So now it's scanning the drawing, bringing in all that data. And then it brings up my database manager so I can see what happened. So here's Nate's Project 2, and here's all of the plants that I had specified. Now when I go to my next project, I can use this as reference, and I can either build on it, I can do modify, view, edit, and I can add more plants to it. I can make modifications here. It's a good way to build your library over time and really build up that plant list. So that's pretty much all I had for today. Anybody have any questions before we wrap up real quick? Feel free to type anything in the chat box or in the question box. Let's see, I got a question here. Can you add Nate's plant list to Nate's 2? So we're talking about merging plant lists. Let's look at that. I go back to my database, and then I go to my planting lists. And the best way to do this is to go ahead and export both of these plant lists. I do export, and export lets you bring it out to a CSV file that you can then edit in Excel. So I save that one. Let's save it to my desktop. Save. And let's get Nate's Project 2. Let's export the plant list. Save that to my desktop as well. Hit finish. And now I can just double click on those and I can copy and paste. Here, let me drag this onto the right window. I can copy and paste the data into one database, or one plant list, excuse me. So let's grab all of this, let's put it in here, and we'll do a save as. We'll call it Nate's plant list merged. Save. All right, let's close out and go back into Keyscape. Back to the database manager and plant list, and now we're going to modify import plant list. This is a good tool to mention anyway. I should have probably mentioned this before. The import tool is very powerful if you do have some plant lists already established in an Excel format. So let's bring in merged, and there it is. It came into this Nate's plant list with a 1 after it, and those are merged together. Then I could, delete these other ones out because they're kind of redundant. So the export import to Excel is a very powerful tool. You can use it a lot of ways. Even if you have, say, a price list or nursery stock list from your nursery, you could bring that in, and it will prompt you to classify material the right way if it's not already present in the database. So that's we've hit 45 minutes today. I'm going to wrap it up here and put it up on YouTube. If anybody has any additional questions, feel free to hit me up. It's Nate, N-A-T-E, at keysoft-solutions.com, or go on our website, find our support number on there, and give me a ring. As always, thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you next week.